Welcome to City Talks, where we discuss the big issues facing UK cities and the latest thinking on urban policy with expert guests. I'm your host, Andrew Carter from the think tank Centre for Cities. Enjoy the episode. Welcome to this episode of City Talks. My special guest today is Justin Bibb, who's the Mayor of Cleveland. Justin, welcome to England. Welcome to London.
Good to be back in London.
Indeed. We were just discussing off air. You are here on the day when a Metro Mayor is about to become our new Prime Minister. So it's even more serious to have you here to talk about what's going on in Cleveland, but also how that translates into what we want to do.
And it's a good reminder that mayors make good chief executives at every level of government.
I thought you were going to say, but mayors make good national leaders, which is your prompt, obviously, or your pitch to be the next, or maybe a future president of the United States. We were looking, keep an eye on you. Just start for listeners and those watching. Just say a little bit about Cleveland. Give a pen portrait. What is Cleveland? What's the city like? Bit of history, so we can just sort of look at it.
Well, in many ways, Cleveland is America, and America is Cleveland. Cleveland has a storied history that has really shaped the most important moments in our country. We birthed the world's first billionaire, and John D. Rockefeller, which powered America's first industrial revolution. We elected the first Black man to lead a major American city, in Carl B. Stokes. And folks often say, without Carl B. Stokes, you don't get a Barack Obama, who became the nation's first Black president.
Yeah.
And during Carl Stokes' tenure as mayor, he really led the nation to show the importance of prioritizing climate justice and environmental justice when a river caught on fire in the late 1960s. And he did a nationwide pollution tour, which led to the Clean Water Act, which then led to the EPA. And so in so many ways, Cleveland has really had its imprint on the fabric of the country. And like many legacy American cities, we fell on hard times. Globalization happened. Many of the jobs that my grandparents came to Cleveland from the segregated South, those jobs got shipped overseas. And unlike many of our peer cities, after this technological age happened, we didn't have a game plan to compete. And so then you have the Great Recession in 2008, and we find ourselves at an inflection moment before the pandemic, really trying to figure out how we emerge out of the pandemic in 2020. And that was a big reason why I ran for mayor. I was a first-time candidate running for office. No one knew who the hell I was.
Good thing or not?
Yeah. I think it's a good business man. Yeah, I was a blank slate.
Exactly. Yeah. We'll take a punt at it.
Exactly. But, many cities like Cleveland at that time were asking themselves, what does a post-pandemic recovery look like? Mm-hmm. And one of the biggest knocks I got in my campaign in 2021 was I didn't have any experience. And the thing I would often say on the campaign trail was I was the least experienced in the status quo. And nobody on the stage had any experience leading a city out of a pandemic. And it was a reset moment for Cleveland, and I think a reset moment for the nation. And over the last 5 years since I've been a mayor of my hometown, we've really shown the nation what's possible in terms of how you reinvent a legacy American city.
Yeah, so you became mayor 2022. Yes. And, just say a little bit about what your vision was. You say, for listeners here, post-industrial legacy, that talks to many of our other cities, particularly as you go through the Midlands and into the North, really thinking about what the next wave of technological development is going to be like, and how do they harness that? How do they make the most of that? And then I guess what the government can do, or the state government or the city government can do to make that happen. Just give us a picture of your view and your vision for Cleveland.
Well, I'd say a few things. I talked about that a great industrial heritage and history that we have in Cleveland. And that heritage and that grit and that ingenuity has never really left our city. And as the pandemic happened, as the nation was trying to figure out how do we have more resilient supply chains, we saw how susceptible we were to our counterparts in Asia with the semiconductor industry, for example. we had to make things in America again.
Yeah.
And we had to figure out a national industrial policy for the country. And those trends bode really well for a city like Cleveland. And so we are leading the nation right now on several key sectors. Number one, advanced manufacturing is our sweet spot, from companies like Eaton, Sherwin-Williams, Parker Hannifin, Lubrizol. Those companies are really embedded in almost every product that we use around the world. Secondly, we take care of the sickest people in the world at the Cleveland Clinic and university hospitals. We're home to the world's only quantum computer dedicated to healthcare and AI at the Cleveland Clinic. Food and beverage manufacturing, Cleveland Kitchen, one of the world's largest producers of kraut and sauerkraut and kimchi.
Yeah.
And all those companies are creating some really great synergy in our city. And we are the only city in the Midwest that has a NASA research center. Most of them are in the South. We have one fully dedicated in the Midwest, right next to our airport, which we're undergoing a nearly $2 billion renovation of our airport. And so from aerospace and defense to advanced manufacturing to healthcare to food and beverage manufacturing, these are the sectors that are really going to propel our economy in the future. And so we have the key business strengths. The issue that we did have, though, and as you know, Andy, for cities to win in this moment, for cities to have a very effective future forward industrial policy, you need two things. You need talent, right?
You do.
A city can't compete without best in class talent.
Right.
And you need land that's shovel ready to go. And I view my role as mayor, not only as a chief executive of this, $2.4 billion corporation, 8,000 employees, but as an asset manager. And we had a lot of vacant land that was underutilized in our city. And we didn't have any shovel-ready job sites to attract companies to Cleveland or retain companies who wanted to grow and expand. And so in my first term, we spent $50 million of American Rescue Plan funds from the Biden-Harris administration. And we created a fund called the Site Readiness for Good Jobs Fund. And now we're underway of converting 1,000 acres of brownfield vacant land that's predominantly in the inner city of Cleveland in Black neighborhoods, and making that land shovel-ready job sites for the future to make Cleveland a walk-to-work city once again. And just last month, we made our biggest announcement with this effort called the Midline. And this business park, we've already assembled 350 acres of land. We've already announced one company coming to the Midline, MMY, who's from London, by the way, a global modular manufacturer, bring 150 jobs back to Cleveland. Shows our thesis works, and we're proving it out in Cleveland. And so land, talent, and a strategy, that's how you reinvent a legacy American city.
Well, again, listeners here, we'll see the relationship and the similarities to the way that different places across the country trying to think about this combination of the hard infrastructure, land. Sometimes we talk about, transport infrastructure, allowing people to get around different places so they can get to the jobs wherever they may be. And then I guess I would call it that, but the software, particularly the talent side and the skills side and the education side. Just say a little bit more about that, man. I mean, in terms of helping people to get the skills, get the qualifications, get the work experience, where are you at, and what are the challenges, and how do businesses get involved in that?
It's fundamental. It is my responsibility as mayor to create the right conditions for good quality job growth and good quality economic development. And without talent, that thesis does not prove out.
Yeah.
Former Mayor Bloomberg has this great quote that I love, that talent attracts capital, not the other way around. And many cities get it wrong, right? We spend so much time on the brick and mortar infrastructure. Yep. Let's build a pretty building. Let's build a nice stadium, right? That'll drive economic growth. That'll drive investment. And that's a key part of the equation.
Yeah.
But if you don't have talent that can build the stadium or build the buildings or work in those companies, then your economy is not going to be strong.
Yeah.
And so one of the unique things that we're focused on in Cleveland is around public education, a growing city, a thriving urban core, requires a highly competitive urban school district. And I'm one of the only mayors in the country that has mayoral control of our schools. And I don't take that responsibility lightly. From my own lived experience as a working class kid growing up in Cleveland, I know how important public education is. Uh, I've seen how it has failed my family, and I've seen how it's benefited my family and benefited so many people in my city. And we are at a crossroads right now in Cleveland in terms of public education. For the last 2 decades, we've lost 50% of our student population. So in the early 2000s, we had 70,000 students going to Cleveland public schools. Now we have only 35,000. So what is that?
So what have they got?
Well, they've gone to a lot of charter schools in and around Cleveland and the inner ring suburbs of our city.
Yeah.
Not many people are having the same amount of kids as they used to.
Yeah.
Birth rates have declined, not just in Ohio and Cleveland, but really across the nation, across the world.
Of course, yeah.
And as we saw that decline in our student population, we failed to make the hard choices around scaling down our footprint because it costs the same amount to resource the building, heat it and cool it and keep it safe.
Yeah.
If you have 1,000 kids or 100 kids. And so 1 week after my reelection last November, we embarked on a plan called Building Brighter Futures, where we told the public we need to close and merge roughly 30 schools. And luckily, our school board supported us with this effort, passed it unanimously. And now we're going to have the resources to go from having islands of excellence in Cleveland Public Schools to a system of excellence, where every 8th grader now will have access to Algebra 1 before the 9th grade. Every high school will have band, PE, in every sports, and AP dual enrollment so kids can get college credit while they're in high school. We're going to have a trade school, east side of Cleveland and the west side of Cleveland. So these are the fundamental investments we're making right now so that the Eatons, the Sherwood-Williams, the Parker Hannafins, the Cleveland Clinics, they have the talent that they need on day one to compete, to create good middle class wages in our city. And that's a big part of what we're doing every single day.
Yeah. And you talked a little bit about both working with the firms that you've already got, the businesses and the assets you've already got, trying to scale them, make them bigger, make them more productive, make them employ more people, create lots of the good jobs that you want, as well as then thinking about how you attract new firms and new activities into your city. Just say a little bit about how you think about that balance, because it's always a sort of challenge or an issue about, you trying to keep what you've got and grow it as well as getting more. And in an ideal world, obviously you'd be doing everything and you'd be making successful interventions on both sides. But just how do you find the balance between building what you've got, maximizing on that, as well as getting more into the city?
Well, when forced to choose between managing the status quo and managing decline or pursuing a very bold agenda around growth, we're pursuing a bold agenda around growth.
Yeah.
We have to.
Yeah.
Pre-pandemic, for the last 20 years, we lost 20% of our population and lost 30% of all traded sector jobs in every part of our city. So we can't afford not to choose a growth agenda. And since we took office, we've seen consecutive increases every year in our population growth. And we're seeing more and more people choosing Cleveland and choosing Northeast Ohio. And our thesis is Cleveland and Ohio. We are a place where the American dream is affordable and still within reach. As folks get priced out in Silicon Valley and in New York and the South, as folks experience wildfires and hurricanes and tornadoes, we think that Cleveland, from a climate standpoint, from a cost standpoint, from a resilience standpoint, we have all the ingredients to be a magnet for new companies and new jobs and new talent and new innovation. Now, at the same time, we have to protect our existing residents and our existing tax base. And so one area, in addition to public education, we're really focused on investing in is around housing. We're seeing a housing crisis around the world. I know the UK is experiencing this.
We do.
The housing crisis.
Yeah.
And Cleveland is really at the cutting edge of showing the nation what's possible around how we tackle America's housing affordability crisis. I'm lucky to be on a great task force led by Bruce Katz. I know
Nobody else.
about-
Friend of the Sender.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
There's a lot of work for LSD
yeah.
Center. He asked me and Mayor Dickens of Atlanta and Governor Cox of Utah to join the National Housing Crisis Task Force. And this is a bipartisan group of, mayors and governors and private sector leaders and foundation leaders, all focused on how we come up with state and local solutions to influence the national agenda around our housing crisis. We're short roughly 5 million homes across the country. And we're doing this in a couple ways in Cleveland. Number one, we're going to address the supply and demand side of the equation by having a company like MMY build modular homes in Cleveland on vacant lots that scale that immediately, addresses the supply and demand part of the equation. We created what we're calling a housing innovation district, where no cost to build a single family home. We've streamlined all the permits using things like form-based code and a pattern book, so it's easier to build. And the area in Cleveland where we decided to start our housing innovation district, only less than 10 homes were built in the last 2 decades.
Yeah.
Doesn't make any
That
sense.
doesn't make any sense. That's true.
And so that gives you an example
Yeah.
of how states and cities could really show the nation what's possible around housing. And so when folks say you're displacing us, you're pursuing a gentrification agenda, well, first thing I ask, what does gentrification mean to you? Right? But you have to do all of the above.
Yeah.
You have to have a pathway to ownership for existing residents, and you have to build new for folks who want to come to your city.
Yeah.
And you have to create the right conditions for companies to grow and expand for your city to be competitive long term.
Pick up on that because I was going to ask you that anyway, but you've used it. We hear this similar debate and discussion here about concerns that where we see growth in some of our former industrial cities, Sheffield or Manchester is a good example. Much more emphasis, unsurprisingly, in the last 6 weeks on what Greater Manchester has been doing, because obviously Metro Mayor Andy there is obviously going to be PM. But then, very quickly concerns about, well, that the city might have grown or the downtown is doing very well, but the rest of the city is still struggling. This growth is not ours. It's all gentrification. Sounds like you're experiencing exactly the same conversations and I guess frustrations in some respect. I mean, as the mayor, just how do you tackle that and how do you get into that? Because it's clearly, in some respects, the downtown is doing relatively well, so you can't deny that. But how do you manage that? How do you engage in that conversation?
Well, it's an age-old problem. Every mayor will tell you that they've always had this debate of downtown versus neighborhoods. And my response to that is very simple. It is not a zero-sum game. Our core, our downtown, generates a majority of all the jobs that fund our budget. Our budget is funded in the city of Cleveland. 60% of it is funded by municipal income tax. And so if the Cleveland Clinic goes under, if Sherwood-Williams goes under, if Key Bank goes under, I don't have money to pay police. I don't have money to pick up trash. I don't have money to fix potholes. And so it can't be a zero-sum game, first and foremost. I think secondly, you have to have an agenda that is broad-based and uplifts everyone. And that's why our investments around housing, our investments around public education are so important in terms of ensuring that we have a pie that's a growing pie where everyone sees themselves in the growth and prosperity of Cleveland. I would also say that you can't have a growing region without a thriving core. And so many of our important regions around the country depend on thriving metro regions. And so I will say this, however, and this is where the mayor-state relationship is so important. And I deal with this all the time as a Democratic mayor in a red state. I'm actually leading a coalition called Blue Cities, Red States for More United States, where it's a coalition of roughly 11 mayors from across the country, from the mayor of Miami and Atlanta and Montgomery, Alabama, where we're really looking at how do we show the nation how moderate, pragmatic mayors and red states are getting stuff done and fixing the biggest problems in the country. Because so many of the conversation right now in American politics is focused on blue city mayors of blue states who have a lot of cover. we ain't got that much cover
Yeah.
in states like Ohio, Florida, and Texas,
Yeah.
and Alabama. And where states can come in and help us is around property tax relief. I can't do anything as a mayor to give my senior citizens long-term homeowner property tax relief, because if you've been fighting a good fight, and you want to age in place in Cleveland, I want to give you some relief, but I'm hamstrung by the legislature in my state in order to do anything. And so we need our Republican legislatures and our Republican governors to really help us around this issue. And I've done some great things with Governor DeWine in Ohio. He's here with me and at this conference this week at Farnborough to talk about how we can bring more aerospace and defense companies to Cleveland and our state. But we need more support from our state legislators to help us cities fight the good fight and have policies on the books at the state level to mitigate displacement.
Yeah. It's so fascinating. I mean, what have you found has been, what is the most convincing set of arguments or positions when you're into those conversations? Is it, the economic heft of Greater Cleveland, that it's not just creating jobs and wealth and opportunity for people of Cleveland, but actually extends well beyond that. And so, the state needs to recognize that it is a hub, it's an anchor, it's an engine of the state economy, not just of the Cleveland economy. Is that part of the argument? What else have you found successful in making that argument about why, party or politicians on the other side of the aisle should really support you in your endeavors?
I think Ohio is a great example of this in the country. We have 3 cities: Cleveland, Columbus, Cincinnati. I would say Cleveland is the best out of those 3.
You wouldn't be doing your job if you said, well, we might be second in that.
Maybe I love Mayor Pearl and third who represent Columbus and Cincinnati respectively. But our 3 metro cities represent over 80% of the state's gross domestic product.
Yeah.
So Ohio doesn't succeed without a thriving Cleveland, without a thriving Columbus, without a thriving Cincinnati. And we make that case every single day of the week, talking to the governor, talking to the state legislature, making sure they do less harm to our cities when they make decisions in the state house. And, every day our jobs as mayors, as Democratic mayors in this red state of Ohio, is about risk mitigation, right? Do no harm. Mitigate it around safety, mitigate it around housing, mitigate it around our income taxes and our tax policies. And we're constantly talking to the legislature on the importance of Ohio cities, because you don't get a strong Ohio without strong cities. And we have a great coalition called the Ohio Mayors Alliance. And this is a coalition of Democratic mayors and Republican mayors, independent mayors, all focused on common sense, pragmatic policies to move the state forward. And it's, I think, one of the best examples in the country of what it means to have pragmatic mayors at the table fighting a good fight.
Yeah, and that's a great point. Many years ago, probably too many for me to remember, I was listening to an American city mayor that was in London as part of the Bloomberg program, actually, and he was giving a talk about the role of the mayors, and he said, in the US we have 3 political parties. We have the Republicans, we have the Democrats, and we have the mayors. And it just sort of struck me. And part of it is because there's a strong emphasis in the current mayors we've got in England, where most of them always express that they try to put place before politics. That's their sort of guiding mantra. Their guiding operating principle is to think about the place before you think about the politics of it. And it sounds like,
absolutely,
there's a similarity in that.
Yeah.
And a value in that. And a significance in that.
That quote comes from the former mayor of Pittsburgh. And especially in this moment right now, I've often said, all politics is local, but all pain is local. We're seeing every day firsthand what it means to, cut Medicare, Medicaid. We're seeing firsthand what it means to cut SNAP benefits for working class families and children. 12,000 families are going to lose SNAP across Greater Cleveland, which is a devastating impact on our social safety net. We're seeing what it means to cut housing vouchers for seniors and single moms. Um, and the other thing folks don't realize, Andy, is that there is no state or local replacement for destruction of the federal social safety net. But we have to bear the brunt of the pain
Yeah.
as America's mayors. We have to find a way to rob Peter to pay Paul, to make sure kids have healthy food when they go to school. We got to rob Peter to pay Paul to make sure we shelter our homeless brothers and sisters off our streets and get them housing with dignity and care and compassion. We have to find a way to still fund our cops to keep our streets safe as they continue to cut funding out of the DOJ, out of this federal government. And so that's the challenging part. And I've seen firsthand what it's like. I was blessed to be mayor under President Biden, and having a president who believed in investing in America's cities. And now I've seen what it's like to have an administration that does not have the same relationship with America's mayors in terms of a thoughtful, proactive, collaborative approach with America's cities. And so it's a challenging time to be a mayor.
Yeah. It's such an important point, because I think because we are so underpowered at the city level in England, and then we look elsewhere for inspiration and examples of what could be achieved. I think there is a misconception, I think, when we look to the US, that firstly, US mayors are all powerful in that sense that you are, you can literally do whatever you want.
I wish.
Well, and you have the fiscal base and the power base in order to do that. You're very powerful political institutions. And secondly, that the federal government, the national government, is not really that important, in a sense that it does what it does, but actually everyday life is really the domain of the places themselves. Not true, right? I mean, not true in the sense that that's a misperception or misconception of actually the reality that it does require partnerships and collaboration. And yes, while you are relatively more powerful than, say, some of our mayors here, there's still degrees of under empowerment in terms of what you can do.
Absolutely. I'll give you two examples where my power has been limited because of policies at the state level, but also an example where my power has been expanded because of me working across the aisle to support Cleveland residents. We know that gun violence is a major issue facing America. Too many families and children are dying across Cleveland and across the country because of gun violence.
Yeah.
Gun violence in America right now is the number one leading cause of death of America's children. It's immoral. It should never happen. If I wanted to pass any laws on the books as mayor with my city council in Cleveland, I could not. Even though we are a home rule state in Ohio, this legislature prevents mayors in Ohio passing any laws to get guns off our streets. And our relationships with guns in our state has gotten so perverse that they passed a law called permitless carry that gives anybody the ability to carry a gun without burn. As a son of a cop, my dad is probably turning over in his grave as a cop, knowing that this is the kind of laws that we have on the books in the state of Ohio. So that's one area where my power is very limited in terms of keeping my city safe, or as it relates to gun violence. Now, on the flip side, in my first year in office, after hearing from so many residents and seeing the impact of drug addiction and low-level marijuana convictions on folks' criminal records from my family, people I grew up with, we led an effort to expunge 4,000 low-level marijuana misdemeanor offenses. Because in Ohio, if you have a low-level drug conviction, you have on your record a collateral sanction where you can't get access to a student loan. If you wanted to start a small business, you might probably locked out of getting access to an SBA loan. You're barred from getting housing.
Yeah.
Real barriers to getting a second chance. So we work to expunge these 4,000 low-level marijuana misdemeanor convictions. The court said I can't do it. So then I get a call from a state senator, Nathan Manning. He said, Mayor, how can I help you? We work with the governor and we passed a law now where every state and every county and city now can pass marijuana pardons statewide now, right? So in one area on gun safety and gun violence where I've been hamstrung, but on the area of criminal justice reform, I work with the governor, I work with the Republican legislature to get something done.
Yeah.
And so it really just depends on the issue where, your power can be expanded or your power is undermined. But that's really the role of the mayor, thinking outside the box, building coalitions, and finding a way to get stuff done for your residents.
Yeah. So to carry on this sort of theme of, what you're able to do, Mayor, just say a little bit more. You talked earlier on that if the economic pie, if the economy of Cleveland isn't functioning, then it doesn't generate the money in order for stuff to happen, however you define that stuff. And as one of the very live debates and discussions right now in the UK is to give our mayors particularly more fiscal flexibility and more fiscal autonomy, to basically make the connection that if you do, if you make interventions in your economy, if your business base grows, if you create more jobs, there should be a fiscal reward, a financial reward for doing that. Because this is the missing element. They have the powers and they have the programs and they have the responsibilities. But essentially, they're getting the vast majority of their money from government in some form of government grant. So they get a big grant of money given to them by separate government to spend on transport or on site reclamation or on housing. But if their economy grows, obviously there's a benefit that there are more jobs in the place, more people in, etc. But the fiscal rewards, the financial rewards are pretty limited. And we have a system designed in that way to do that. And the real live conversation right now is, let's give our mayors more reason to grow their tax base, whether that's an income tax incentive or corporation or business tax incentive or a business property tax incentive. Let's give them more of that. And if they then grow their economy, they keep more of that, they can reinvest it and so on and so on. So just sort of there's a long monologue for me on that, but I'm just so fascinated, your view on that first. Good moves, but also how does it then shape what you do as an administration? Because you have to grow the tax base. And that really does sharpen your mind.
Absolutely.
The margins, yes, no, maybe, let's do more on that. It does really make a difference.
I think Ohio has a great model. Now, the state over the last several decades has continued to cut the local government fund, which historically we had as a source of revenue for our cities. But in our state, we have a balanced budget amendment where I'm required by law to balance everybody. I can't pass the buck to the next Congress or anybody else. And that endears a certain level of fiscal discipline and fiscal prudence. I'm also responsible for growing our municipal income tax because, as I said in my earlier comments, 60% of my budget is funded by the municipal income tax, which is 2.5%. And so if I'm growing jobs, if I'm growing our tax base, I get the net benefit, right, to reinvest in housing, reinvest in site readiness development, reinvest in public education, so many other things. And by having the fiscal autonomy, I get to leverage my balance sheet in a way to drive growth, to drive prosperity in a way that many of my peer cities across the country and really across the world can't do, that they can't in the UK. So I'm a big believer in giving mayors the fiscal independence and the fiscal autonomy to do what they need to do at the local level. Because we know better what our residents want than anybody in DC or anybody in Columbus in the South. I hear from folks when I can barely go to church or the grocery store. When I put out a long to-do list.
So, Mr. Let me tell you what you need to do.
Exactly. But I know what part of West Park or Cam's Corner needs around housing. I know what part of Mount Pleasant needs around street infrastructure. I know, where company A needs to go in Cleveland for it to make sense for Cleveland. And, our administration has taken fiscal discipline very seriously. I can't get companies to believe in Cleveland and say yes to Cleveland if I don't have a strong fiscal strategy to keep our finances intact. When I took office, we inherited a $61 million deficit. We made hard choices. And because of those hard choices, every year we've been in office, we've had a structurally balanced budget. And because of that, we've had 6 consecutive bond rating upgrades, right? So I'm showing the private market that we know how to manage our finances, we know how to manage our expense base, and we know how to create the right environment for good quality job creation, which is in turn creating Cleveland as an investable asset for the future.
Yeah. And just to give you, so you said, I think you said 60% of your budget is essentially derived from your tax base. To give you a comparison, it's not a perfect comparison, but in the UK, local government, roughly 5%.
That's it.
That's it.
And the majority from
And
the
then 95% is essentially coming to them in some shape or transfer from a national government. And I mean, I could bore you to death with this.
No.
This is podcast when I'm talking to you, not talking to myself, but so that you can see this sort of fund. And what it does is that essentially the client, the customer, is government,
and not the resident,
and not the resident, and not the business.
That's
the business is a bonus. Right?
Yeah.
If I get the business, it's a bonus. I get jobs, and every mayor will tell you that they are out there, making the pitch and making the hard decisions, etc. But when 95% of your money is essentially coming to you from the government, you spend an awful lot of time in London, in Whitehall, in Westminster, down the road from where we are today, talking to the government about how you can get an extra grant. But more than that, if you grow your tax base, if you are then seeing the proceeds that come from hard decisions or tough decisions or good decisions, you also don't really get the tax-based benefits, which is an interesting dynamic, which is why we're in such this moment where hopefully new administration will make some big strides in doing that. And some of the proposals we propose to think very carefully about introducing some kind of income tax stimulant, income tax sharing, where they can at least get some of that.
I think it's the right idea. And I think it would create more dynamism and agility in the UK economy. Because Manchester is very different than London, and vice versa. And you want you want the country to be a country of cities, to attract more diverse investment, a more diverse talent base, and it can't be just dependent on what happens in London. You need that broader flexibility in how your economy operates.
And so related to that, I get your thoughts on, you talked again about the midline scheme and the Sites for Good Jobs Fund, which I presume, I don't know, but interesting. Again, we don't really have this mechanism here because of for the reason I've just said. Well used. I don't know so much in Cleveland, but interested your thought on this. Is this idea where you introduce some form of tax increment financing, which is part and parcel of what mayors do, right? Which is essentially you're borrowing against future proceeds to unlock the growth, which then produces the proceeds, et cetera, et cetera. I presume that kind of intervention is stock in trade for a city like Cleveland. It's in many respects, and again, exceptional here. I can maybe pick 3 or 4 places that have done that.
Wow.
One of them being London, occasionally in 1 or 2 other places. But again, just as a part of the toolbox, not really, and goes back to my previous one, it's because the proceeds, the revenue stream to repay the debt, as it were, not available in a straightforward way.
And, we get this debate in Cleveland a lot, where a lot of my critics on the left say that I'm giving, tax breaks to billionaires who don't need it. And my response is often the notion of 0% of 0 is 0.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
You go back to the Housing Innovation District. When you have, less than a handful of homes being built in 2 decades, and these vacant lots are not producing, real economic benefit or real return on investment for our tax base or our residents. But if I layer on a TIF, that's going to drive more tax base, drive more tax revenue, less money I'm spending on a public works to mow vacant lots, less blight, less crime, more prosperity. That's an investment worth doing.
Yeah.
And I'm sure my critics on the left would say, we want less crime, we want less black, we want more seniors or working class families have a pathway to home ownership. And so this is why I love being the mayor. I don't have time for anecdotal debates. I'm not a pundit, I'm a mayor, right? And my residents expect results and expect real deliverables. And to me, the role of government and the role of the private sector, public sector rather, is to incentivize, private growth and private investment. We have to create the economic conditions and the economic environment for that growth and that investment to happen. You can't do that if you're not being thoughtful about leveraging your balance sheet in order to do that. And so we've been very thoughtful about how we've used TIFs. Not only have we used a TIF to create one of the largest investments in housing in a majority Black neighborhood in Cleveland on the East Side, we've used it to unlock nearly $5 billion of investment for our waterfronts. Most folks around the world don't consider Cleveland to be a waterfront city, but now we are becoming a waterfront city from the shores of Lake Erie to the banks of the Cuyahoga River, where we are going to be a city that has two distinct waterfronts connected to the core of Cleveland. That's going to drive more investment, more talent, and make Cleveland a global example of how to take this legacy industrial history and embrace a new vision around that. And the TIFs have been a great tool.
Yeah.
And so I'm a big believer in using TIFs in a thoughtful way, both for broad scale development in the core, but also for neighborhood growth and investment too.
Yeah. Well, and thinking about, you are here to talk to, to various colleagues as well. Actually, in terms of being the mayor and you said using or being thoughtful about that kind of intervention, what lesson, what advice, what perspective would you give to the mayors? If we're fortunate enough to get into that position, and I think we should, we're an advocate of that endeavor. What bit of advice, given what you've done and what you've seen, would you just say, you just think about this or be careful about that or really double down on that? What would you say?
I'd say three things. Number one, the most important power a mayor has is their convening power. And you have to use your convening power thoughtfully, with a real tangible strategy and vision to get something done.
Yeah.
Right. I hate meeting to meet. We got to meet about something. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And all the large scale projects that we've been blessed to, launch and execute, from our work on housing to our $5 billion waterfront effort to the site readiness fund midline project. We've been thoughtful about using the power of City Hall to convene the public and the private sector around a tangible, highly executable project. I think secondly, a lot of mayors, and this is the hardest part of the job, and because of the Bloomberg Harbor program, I learned this lesson early. This job, you're putting out fires literally, figuratively every single day, whether it's police involved shooting, or losing a young person to gun violence, or you have a predatory landlord who is not, upkeeping on the property, and seniors are losing heat and AC during the winter or the summer season. Your whole tenure as mayor can just be putting out fires and going from one crisis to the next. One of the things that we did early in my tenure was we really sat down and thought about what we called my gravestone priorities. So long before I leave City Hall and I'm an old man, and hopefully I will be 100-something years old with tons of grandkids and a big family. My chief of staff at the time said, Mayor, what do you want to be remembered for? What do you want the three things on your gravestone to be during your tenure as mayor? So the list went from like 10.
It's a big,
It was like this big.
It was very big, right? Big gravestone.
Exactly. To 3. And that allowed me to really focus my non-crisis management time on executing my gravestone priorities. And you really need to manage your time well as mayor, because the time goes by fast. And I'm sure, that lesson is going to bode well for Andy being the former mayor and now as prime minister. he's going to know, okay, I got a finite amount of time to really leverage my political mandate, my political capital to get some big stuff done.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because the job can really, take a hold of you really quickly. So use your committing power, manage your time towards your big legacy gravestone priorities is my number two. And the last thing I would say, particularly in this time in our global politics, where people don't trust the media, people don't trust politicians, and people are consuming information in so many different ways. You got to over communicate. I call it a grass tops and grassroots strategy around communication. Not only I'm on podcasts like this one, right? I'm on the evening and morning news, but I'm really embracing new media in a different way, and I'm going and knock on doors too, talking to residents about my agenda and what I'm doing. Over communicate.
And you see that as being a fundamental aspect of the job, rather than it's a distraction.
No,
it takes me away from what I'm meant to be doing.
it's all about the attention economy.
Yeah.
And if you're not controlling the attention economy to get your message through as a mayor, then you're not doing your damn job. And to me, that's been the biggest lesson, particularly as I've started my second term, is, we're trying to land these big planes we teed up in the first term, but we got to over communicate all the damn time.
Yeah.
So people know that you did what you said you were going to do.
Yeah.
And that's half the battle.
Yeah.
And I'm a big believer in the see, touch, feel era of politics these days.
Yeah.
People got to see you, they got to touch you, and they got to see and feel and touch the change.
Yeah.
And you can't outsource that leadership as a mayor to anybody else. You have to control that yourself.
I could talk to you for hours on all manner of subjects, and we haven't even touched. I've got notes in front of me, and we've only.
You got to have you back.
Probably, well, I got to have you back. That's for sure. But just to almost take us back to where we started. Obviously, thinking about where Cleveland is, rich and long history. Times of flourishment and times of difficulty. And when you think about now, not just in your current term, but where you think Cleveland is and what you would ideally want to think about it as we move forward 10 or 20 years time. As you say, you were born in Cleveland, you may live in Cleveland for a very long time. You're a young man, so you'll see these changes happen to your city. Mayor, what is it? Where do you think Cleveland is now? What's the next phase? And I suppose, where will you see that success? How will you know that's happening?
Well, it's fitting that America just celebrated its 250th birthday on July 4th. This year we also celebrated Cleveland's 230th birthday. And what I love about America and what I love about Cleveland is that we are a country and a city that believes in the power of reinvention and the power of second acts. And I believe Cleveland is now in its most important second act, where all the trends benefited from, the affordability crisis and the fact that we are one of the most affordable cities in America, to, our world's climate crisis. And we are emerging as a climate hub, as a model of climate resiliency. And as our nation pursues a national industrial policy, we have the key ingredients for that ecosystem to really thrive in Cleveland, from the ability to incubate your idea from Case Western Reserve, get funding from a local VC firm like the Ohio Fund, and you can grow and expand and scale all in Cleveland, Ohio. And so in many ways, Cleveland is the epitome of America's comeback story. And it's my hope and my belief and my dream that Cleveland will be an example of the world of what creating a livable city can look like, and what, we will be a place where the American dream is alive, within reach, and still affordable. And so my hope is that future students like me, when I came here to LSC 18 years ago, my dream was to one day go back to Cleveland and make Cleveland a model example of urban renaissance for the world to see. And hopefully one day Cleveland will be on the cover of The Economist magazine as the world's most livable city, as an example of what Brooklyn prosperity looks like. And for me, that's the dream long term.
perfect note to finish. I wish you well in those endeavors. Mr. Mayor, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much indeed.
Likewise. Come visit us.
Thank you. I will. Thank you for listening to this episode of City Talks, brought to you by the Centre for Cities. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify and Podbean by searching Centre for Cities. Please rate and subscribe if you liked what you heard. You can follow the Centre on Twitter at Centre for Cities, all one word, or on LinkedIn for the latest on what the Centre is up to. To hear about all our latest reports and briefings and upcoming events, sign up to our fortnightly newsletter via our website, centreforcities.org. If you have any comments on the episode or suggestions for topics we should cover, we'd love to hear from you. Do tweet us or send us an email to info@centreforcities.org.